Hey, welcome to What the Flip podcast. I'm your host, Victor Vogel. A couple of things I want to share with you just before we get started tonight, but we will be covering topic number 10 or fact number 10 in our study of the extraordinarily expensive healthcare system we have in this country. All these videos are uh, recorded and then placed in a series called "Attack on America: The Healthcare War," and you can find those on the streaming there across the bottom of your screen on my What the Flip podcast. Also, I've created a Twitter account, and that's there, and that's my Instagram right there. So a lot of this stuff you'll be able to find in those areas. So just thought I would mention that. Now, tonight, let's get on with what we're going to be doing tonight, okay? The first thing I want to mention is the uh, new podcast I have coming out. It'll be able to pick it up on your favorite podcast areas, and it's something that I spent a lot of years involved in. Uh, it's focusing on communication and some of the things that we're doing or trying to do in this world today from a communication standpoint, at least as far as from what I've seen. My background's in that area, and I'll let you listen to the primer. It'll tell you a little bit about my background, but that's mostly my educational history, and a lot of my consulting and work world was focused on communication, helping people communicate more effectively. But I think you're going to enjoy that podcast. It's really focusing on, it's called Real Communication, and it's focusing on what communication is really about and what really is involved in and how much communication permeates all our life, and sort of the impact that the pandemic has created on the communication world, and also the phenomena of social media and a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, we're just going to talk lightly about all of those topic areas in the podcast on an ongoing basis. So if you've got any kind of thoughts about communication or experiences you would like to share, whether they're from a personal dynamic, from a business dynamic, from how you feel about it relative to social media, how you feel about it relative to politics, whatever it might be. If there's some on your mind, you can certainly dump them in the comments section here on What the Flip podcast. But I'll also have in this podcast, as you listen to them, there'll be places for you to leave reviews and comments about future topics you'd like me to touch on and talk about and help folks with. So that's called Real Communications, and it's right up here. You can see that. That's the logo you'll want to look for on Instagram and all of the podcast sites like Apple and others that are out there. Just put it out there yesterday, so it's probably still in the mill. Actually, I'm not going to start the podcast till January, but I'm looking for people who would like to meet with me one-on-one and discuss communication relative to what they've gone through with communication of any kinds or any sorts, or their thoughts on it. So I'm looking for guests that I can bring on and simply talk. I'm not necessarily looking for experts in communication. You'll see why after you listen. That's why I call it Real Communication. Uh, I'm looking for the everyday people out there. Okay, the second thing I want to cover with you, and let me just kind of share my screen here with you a little bit. There we go. I'd like to kind of talk about this for just a second. Let me come back over here. There we go. Uh, this is a story. It's actually a 60-minute story on this guy here who they were investigating in terms of his PPE sales. It says inside the chaotic market where shortages of critical supplies persist, this guy's getting filthy rich. He's making a lot of promises and not delivering. And it's confusing a lot of things. Anyway, they had an investigation into him. That's a good thing to watch because you can watch somebody sit there right across from an experienced newscaster who asked pointed, direct questions and had factual information in her hands, and just watch him lie through his teeth right there in it, which is kind of interesting, I think. But anyway, what it is, it's a real good example of exactly what we talked about yesterday, and the whole idea of companies and organizations consolidated and focusing on the money and the profit and not on the purpose of healthcare or the human side of healthcare, what it takes to make things work successfully. And one of the things I found interesting, and this is really, if you go to 60minutes.com, this is actually the story. You can actually read down through some of this stuff, and it's kind of shocking when you read through it. But this guy, Jim Mangia, has a series of small clinics. He's not a large grouping. It's not like hundreds of them. It's just there are a few of them in the southern Los Angeles area where they're really providing a service to people who really can't afford it and the lower income community area of Los Angeles. And what he said was in this interview that he basically ran out of PPE. He had about a week's left and he was frantic to find more. So he was trying to buy it everywhere he could. And get this, because this is what we talked about yesterday, the consolidation and the control of major hospital conglomerates. Uh, what he was basically saying is that he was competing as a small company, he was competing against large hospital conglomerates, and they were outbidding him. So PPE is something that should not be in the bidding process whatsoever. It should simply get provided to people for the least possible cost as we can make it happen during this pandemic. These people were putting this stuff up for bid like an auction. And that's what happens when you have a decentralized control in a free market economy that's really unethical capitalism at this point in our time. It's like we're not set for this to help people get over this pandemic. We just got to see how much money we can make out of this. So they create a bidding war. So people like this guy, Joe Mancini, lose out in this system. The cost of those PPEs skyrocket because it gets into a bidding war because people have to have them. It's not like it's one of those things where they can just say, oh, okay, we're just not going to buy it because the price is too high. They have to have it. So the bidding war keeps driving the price up, and there you go. Now you begin to see the cost associated with why we have so much cost within our healthcare system. These kinds of things are allowed to happen. They don't tend to happen under a central government, centrally controlled group like Canada and UK and other places like that. Usually now, then that government has a bargaining power, has all of that the government for that country's purchasing authority and power can negotiate better deals. And then they can take that and get it down to the Joe Mangias as well as everybody else who needs it. Consequently, they're better protected in the long run than we are in our hospitals. So there you go. There's an example. Tonight we're talking about question or fact number 10 out of the 12. U.S. healthcare. U.S. healthcare administrative costs are the highest of all advanced economies that have healthcare systems similar to ours, higher than everyone else. This chart goes into that to show us that. So this is just another example right here of why everything is so costly. It's just so costly. Uh, it's one of those deals where um, we're looking primarily at the administrative cost, and then but then this comes back and ties into the cost of healthcare in the rest of the world. I'm sitting here making sure I'm still on Facebook. Why okay. Everything is there so we go. Costly. It's just so. Okay, so what happens here is uh, this then ties this particular segment, which is just like an administration, points to the stuff we've already talked about and why the cost of healthcare in our country is so tied to hospitals and professional services, the largest portion of that cost. And the largest portion of those costs in the hospitals end up being in how they manage or administer their hospital. So you can see here, let me just break this down. This green area was done by a study group, and you can look this up when you get the link to the article here. I'll probably provide that in the comments section of this podcast post sometime in the next day or two, and then you can go look this whole article up. But you can see here the green represents basically the administrative cost associated with just hospitals. And this cost in the blue, or yeah, I think that's blue, or it's bluish green, there's a payer administrative cost. These are the costs for countries like France and Germany and Canada and the United Kingdom. Now, we have a payer cost system too. It's called Medicare. Okay, and when we say payers, we're really talking about a single payer system where the government is in control of it, and they negotiate all the pricing and they pay out. They may use private industries to administer, contract administer the processing of all of that, but the government controls it. They set the prices, they set the fee structures, they set, payment methods and all of that kind of stuff. So when you're here in the United States, you're in Medicare and you buy a supplemental plan, there are certain things that Medicare doesn't cover, but it's not a lot. They cover nearly 85% of something that could go wrong that's severe. And then really what the supplemental is you're paying a health insurance company, or actually you're not even paying them anymore. The government's paying them to give you a plan for free and then let them manage the process. So it's kind of what they get paid by the government to do this, and they get paid handsomely to do this, obviously, because you can see our payer costs are higher than these other countries because they're linked to and tied to the private hospitalization and the private healthcare system, in which we've already seen all the reasons why it is so expensive and why it's such a problem on us out there in the world today. So this is what you have here. You can see it right here. The United States far outstrips in terms of hospital costs these other countries. The hospitals fall under the government in these other countries. You can see administratively they're outside of Netherlands, and then Canada has some private segments, kind of a hybrid kind of system like we do, only ours is balanced more to the private industry. Theirs is balanced more towards the single payer industry. But there's really only three countries that even have privatization involved: the Netherlands and Canada, and the government controls most of that. So that the cost of hospital administration alone just so far exceeds, and that's why the hospitals account for about 36% of the overall cost. And that a lot of that associated with what we talked about. Doctors come in, they're people are jacking up their prices under these larger corporations, uh, and then they're getting a percentage of this and a percentage of that. So the general costs for doctors, lab services, all those kinds of things that are falling under these larger hospital groupings are driving our administrative expense up, because we've got to pay more for people in the system to get them and attract them to stay there. Uh, you know, it's just a revolving catch-22 scenario. Then you really have a hard time controlled administrative costs in a private system like that. Whereas when governments have this under their arm, and this is, you watch, it's really a problem right now. We're in a very precarious situation because uh, the vaccines are about to come out, and so what's going to happen is you're going to have that whole supply chain, and they're pushing this out as opposed to controlling it, setting the rules and saying, this is it, this is the most you can, you know, pay for something, this is the most something's going to cost. uh, you've got it going out across the states again, like you did with PPE. You get into bidding wars, and then people are, offering that, they're trying to manipulate it, and it just doesn't work well. It doesn't work well. And that's how Trump's initially going to roll it out. And hopefully, what Biden will do is put a hold on that, get it back under central control. This is kind of what Cuomo did with the hospitals in New York. You had a hospital chain that had in a market area or region that had like 10 hospitals or 15 hospitals, where four of those hospitals were just blown out by the number of people that had coronavirus, and they were trying to just make them work. And of course, Cuomo was saying, you got more hospitals, spread them out to these other hospitals so we can keep the elective surgeries and the other things going. And they were going, well, we don't operate that way because it's a profit system, see? And that would mean other hospitals might lose money or even be burdened where they couldn't make money. So it is amazing. It is amazing how screwed up this is. And it is scary to think that our vaccine system is just about to go that way. And then you've got it sent out to states who are being controlled by different people who have different power perspective. Hell, we have a general attorney suing out of Texas, is suing others, the primary states that won the election for Biden, saying overturn them. He's out of Texas saying doing that to those states. So how do you think he is going to deal with? How do you think people with this kind of mentality and control are going to deal with a vaccine that has so much emphasis on it? So much emphasis on it. This is the dilemma with private healthcare systems in a free market society under an unethical capitalistic environment. That's the problem. That's the problem. You're going to have the rich buying off vaccines. That's the potential. What can keep that from happening is the government and the pharmaceutical companies hold on where it gets distributed to. But if it gets distributed, what they're saying is, hey, we have, for example, for Michigan, we might have you know, 20 million vials of vaccine we're going to give you. Now it's up to you in that state where you put them. Okay. And so some states are going to spread them out where the need is the greatest. Other states are going to spread them out where, yeah, the right people get it, and maybe we get a different idea than you do. We'll give it to everybody who goes out to bars so that they can go out to bars and open up the business again. So I mean, all that mentality, all that variance in uh, a system that is about healthcare. It's not about something you can pick and choose. This is life or death for people. And we're allowing people like this, some of these people in some of these states who just totally deny anything whatsoever to have control over how something like a vaccine is going to happen. So this is the byproduct of having a dysfunctional healthcare system, and why so much I've shown you slide after slide after slide in terms of why it's cost more, why quality of healthcare isn't as good, time after time after time again. Why we need to go to a single payer Medicare for all system, or a system similar to Canada or the UK or somewhere, and really just do it better than they do. That's what we need to do. So anyway, there you go again, just another piece in the cog. And I'm going to give you two more pieces that kind of put the nail in it all and say, if you can, after watching this series, all of it, all the way through, and get the information, if you can still say, hey, I want my private insurance, you're paying horrendously. A lot, not only you, but a lot of other people are paying horrendously for your private insurance. And it's making a lot of people rich at the same time. Okay, don't forget about don't forget about my podcast up here, Real Communication. Again, if you have something that you want to talk about, or a question you have about communication, I think the initial podcast I have out there, there's a link that's called anchor.fm slash real communication. And that takes you to the podcast as it is on their site. But like I said, if you get out there and look up Real Communications, you'll get the first one. And I think I was asking the question, have you thought about how you communicate today? Have you thought about how you actually communicated today? And my guess is, like I said in the podcast, that I bet you didn't. I'm really betting pretty heavily on the fact that you didn't, because we take it for granted. We just take it for granted that we're communicating. And there is so much more involved in being a good communicator and being effective. You're probably asked, there are probably people on the Democratic side that are asking, how can these people believe this? There's a communication issue involved there. There's probably people on the Republican side that say, how can these people not see this? Same communication problem. And because we don't ever get that communication resolved, we're highly divided. And with something like a pandemic or any other thing that's important in this country, trade or transportation or climate or anything else, if you had people working together as teams, if you had people who could really just kind of put all of their expertise in and not be pushing for a particular solution. And maybe that's the difference, pushing for that solution, but instead seeking a best solution, the best one that encompasses all of everything. I get absolutely pissed off when I see the word compromise. You know, what really makes me mad is when I see Mitch McConnell stand up and say, "I think we're coming to a compromise." You know what compromise is, ladies and gentlemen? Break it apart. Go look it up. It is basically where two parties who can't agree end up settling on losing something from both parties to move forward. That's compromise. That's compromise. It's a lose-lose way to come to a decision. Synergy, on the other hand, is where people come together, bring their ideas. They fight them out, they argue about them, but they're not so locked in to that idea that another idea might fit with their idea. And when you put it together, it's better than both of those individual ideas. I've seen that happen so much during my team building years. And it is marvelous to see it happen when it happens. The problem is you've got to have an effective way of communicating with each other, understand what that means in order for you to get past this idea that I have the only right solution. And then that just warps into some really interesting things like, socialism. What is socialism? Really? Who cares about socialism, capitalism? What I'm interested in is something that fixes and makes healthcare available to everybody at a reasonable price. Okay, everybody, not just a few. I want everybody to be able to go and have the money and the food they need to eat healthy and raise their kids healthy. I want people to be able to go into a bar and enjoy being around everybody and not worry about whether somebody is red or blue or, white or black or whatever it might be. In fact, it's interesting in a bar, by the way, pretty interesting phenomenon from a communication perspective. You have a lot of people arguing. I've sat around bars a lot of times just watching people. It's pretty phenomenal. You have a lot of arguments, a lot of debates, people jockeying for this, jockeying for that, till the music starts. Then everybody's feet starts tapping, and just everybody loves the music, and they forget about all this other crap, and they just come in to dance and really enjoy being around each other. Isn't that strange? So maybe there's some cultural aspects around communication. All right. Anyway, so enough of that. You see what's up there. It's find it. Get involved with me. Let me know some of the things that you think are important about a communication you'd like to see in a podcast. This is not about going and touching base with the written books out there, the written books. That's like I said in the podcast, if you're looking for 10 quick tips about how to be an effective communicator, there are none. There are no quick tips. There's a lot of people presenting them because when I looked up 10 tips to communicate, I got, I think it was 226 million URLs I could look up. Can you imagine trying to go through all of that? It isn't about tips. It isn't about quick solutions. I know everybody wants that because that's what they're getting used to oh, well, I can go on and on. I won't do that in this session. So, hope you tune in Monday. We're going to, next week, we'll do the last two segments, 11 and 12. And during that time, we'll finish up. Between now and then, I'll put the link to this article I've been quoting from and following, so you can have that article available. I'd suggest you read it all the way through, all of the facts again, and pick up stuff I probably didn't cover as well as I should have. But my objective was just to get you acquainted with it all, and then you try to make heads or tails of it from your perspective. Uh, and then hopefully, when you go to sit down and talk with your representatives or people who are talking about this, you can talk about it from a factual intelligence side and not just a one-sided emotional perspective, so to speak. So anyway, you have a good day. Can remember this vaccine is. I've heard this probably 15 times today on the news. This vaccine is not going to provide the relief you are looking for from that. It's not going to bring you back to normal between now and next June. What will bring you back to normal faster is if you wear your mask, you stay socially distant, don't get involved in going anywhere you don't need to go, stay at home as much as possible over the next 2 to 3 months while they're rolling out the vaccines. It'll take all the way through probably June of people being inoculated, still wearing masks, still staying socially distanced, but at least maybe things will be opening up. But if we don't get the numbers down, you're going to continue to stay restricted, and then people are going to rebel and get hurt and get mad and everything. But you don't have to be that way. You can wear the mask, follow the social distancing through Christmas and on up until March, and then watch all that really go down. Watch it really go down fast, and then you'll have some positive feedback that shows you that if you stay with that for another couple of months and maybe you got the freedom to get out a little more than you would, but you still have your mask on wherever you go, you might have that opportunity by June to actually have a great 4th of July, or maybe even a good Memorial Day if we're really good at it. So take up on the mask, the social distancing, and staying at home as much as possible. Don't throw parties. Don't get into that stuff. You're just going to delay everything for everybody if you do. Everything these scientists have told us has actually come true. If you go back and look at all of it, it's actually come true. That's what they're saying. If we get our handle on this, we got a shot at it. If we don't, we're just going to delay it into the 4th quarter of next year. That's just horrible to think about. So don't do that. All right. Have a good evening. I will see you Monday, if not before, doing something. Have a great day. This is What the Flip podcast. What the flip's going on with our healthcare system? Anyway, I'm Victor Vogel. Have a good evening.